In this video, we're going to go a little bit deeper into this reason why we trade. The answer, it ends up, is going to be something we call comparative advantage, which gives rise to the division of labor, or specialization. First, I want to point out the importance of production. Previously, we have established that we trade because we have differences in preferences and differences in endowments. That is, we have different things and we want different things. However, the fact is that our endowments are typically not something that just fall to us out of the sky. It's something that we produce, right? So, we have different endowments because we have differences in our production. I produce different things than you produce. This raises the question then, why don't we all just produce what we want, making trade totally irrelevant and unnecessary? Which is a fair question. That's the question that comparative advantage is going to answer for us. But first, let's talk about absolute advantage. Absolute advantage is defined as being able to produce something at a lower input cost. So here we have a sense of why we might want to trade with each other. Maybe it costs me less to produce something than it costs you to produce it, in which case it would make sense for me to specialize in producing it and for you to specialize in whatever you have a lower input cost for. To make this concrete, let's look at Billy and Cindy producing car washes and lemonades. In terms of their cost, they're going to be using their time. So for Billy, it costs him 6 minutes to make a lemonade, 4 minutes to wash a car. For Cindy, it's the opposite. 4 minutes to make a lemonade, 6 minutes to wash a car. Here we can immediately see the absolute advantages. All right, Billy takes 4 minutes to wash a car. That's less time than Cindy's 6 minutes, so Billy should focus on washing cars. Cindy takes 4 minutes to make a lemonade versus Billy's 6, so Cindy should focus on making lemonade. Now if they do this, it ends up over time, a learning process should happen, where Billy gets progressively better at washing cars and perhaps worse at making lemonade as he's not practicing it. For Cindy, it's just the opposite. She gets better at producing lemonade and worse at washing cars. Now let's see how this affects production. Here, let's imagine that we have, say, 1 hour of work, where Billy and Cindy each take that hour and decide how to use it. Suppose at first that they don't specialize, so Billy spends a half hour making lemonade. In that time, it's 6 minutes apiece, 30 minutes, Billy can make 5 lemonades. And then Billy takes a half hour and washes cars. In that time, 4 minutes apiece, 30 divided by 4 gives us 7.5 car washes. For Cindy, the numbers are exactly flipped because her time costs are exactly flipped. Total, we end up producing then 12.5 lemonades and 12.5 car washes. However, once they specialize, we know Billy is going to focus on washing cars. He can actually do 15 in an hour. That's 7.5 in a half hour multiplied by 2, got 15. For Cindy, she could do 15 lemonades in that hour, for a total of 15 lemonades and 15 car washes. So we see immediately, by specializing, even before any learning process takes place, we've gained 2.5 lemonades and 2.5 car washes. That would be our gain from specializing in trading. Now why is trading here? Well, odds are good that Billy doesn't actually need 15 cars washed, and odds are good Cindy doesn't want to drink 15 lemonades. So, for them to get what they want, Billy, now having a bunch of car washes, Cindy now having a bunch of lemonade, are going to have to trade with each other. Now when we go to the dynamic case, that is where learning happens, we find the gain is even greater. Billy, after the learning process, can now produce 20 car washes, versus the original where the two of them combined did 12.5, so that's a gain of 7.5 car washes. Similarly for lemonade, as Cindy has focused on lemonade, which she was best at, and then learned how to do it even better. So here we can immediately see gains from specializing in trading, just from the fact that we have different abilities in our ability to produce different things. But it ends up that comparative advantage is an even better concept, because it is more broad. Now in this absolute advantage case, it only works if, say, I'm better at one thing than you are, and you're better at the other thing than I am. But what if I'm better at everything? Or, more likely, what if you're better at everything? Can we still gain from specializing and trading with each other? Absolute advantage doesn't provide an answer for us. Comparative advantage does, and that answer is yes. Right. So what a comparative advantage is? A comparative advantage is being able to produce at a lower opportunity cost, rather than a lower input cost. Opportunity cost brings into mind this idea that when I'm doing something, I'm giving up some opportunity. So if I'm using my time to make lemonade, I'm really not giving up my time. I'm giving up the car washes that I could have produced. That's what I would have done if I didn't make lemonade. So this suggests that I might gain from specializing in a task, not because I'm really good at it, but because I'm terrible at everything else. Right? If I am, for example, a mediocre economist at best, but I would be absolutely terrible as a medical doctor, then I'm still better off being an economist because I'm giving up the thing that I'm absolutely terrible at. Or put another way, my opportunity cost is very, very low. I'm not giving up much to do what I'm doing. Okay. So with comparative advantage, we would have to look at costs in a slightly different way. First, suppose before learning, say Billy is just bad at everything. It takes him 12 minutes to make a lemonade, 10 minutes to wash a car. Well, Cindy's reasonably good at everything. 4 minutes for a lemonade, 6 minutes for a car wash. Now here, when we think about comparative advantage, remember we need to think about opportunity costs, not time costs. So the question then, when we look at, say, the cost of lemonade, is not how long does it take you to make the lemonade, but it's what else could you do at that time. So Billy, when he makes a lemonade, it takes him 12 minutes. In 12 minutes, he could have washed 1.2 cars. While Cindy, it takes her 4 minutes to make a lemonade. In that time, she could have washed, I think it's something like 0.67, I'll round it to 0.7, could have washed 0.7 cars. So in this case, the opportunity cost for lemonade suggests that Cindy should really focus on making lemonade. Her opportunity cost is less. That is, Billy, while he may not be great at either thing, is really, really bad at making lemonade. While Cindy, though she's good at both, is relatively better at making lemonade. When we look at car washes, we'll have Billy and Cindy, and we do similar math. With Billy, when he washes a car, it takes him 10 minutes. In that time, he would have only made 0.83 lemonades. He's not giving up very much. While Cindy, if she washes a car, she could have made 1.5 lemonades with those 6 minutes. Right, so she's giving up more. So we'd want to have Cindy, being the one with the lower opportunity cost for lemonade, focus more of her time on making lemonade, while Billy focuses more of his time on washing cars. Now, unlike the previous case, we might not want them to fully specialize just because Billy's so bad at things originally, so Cindy might have to pick up some of the slack even when it comes to washing cars. We'll see that in the next slide. Now, after learning, things may change a bit. Billy, being focusing on car washing, is going to get better at it. And since he's not making any lemonade, he'll probably get even worse than he already was at that. For Cindy, because she's probably going to have to split her time, focusing more on lemonade, she gets a little bit better, but not a whole lot at making lemonade, and manages to just maintain her ability to wash cars. Now, when we look at opportunity costs, we find out that the specialization still makes sense, right? Cindy is still the one with the low opportunity cost for making lemonade. That's what she should do. Billy still has the low opportunity cost for washing cars, so that's what he should do. But that difference has gotten wider. In other words, there's an even stronger reason for them to specialize than originally. Here we can look at production. So here we have Billy and Cindy, each of them spending half of their time making lemonade and half producing car washes. If they do that, they can produce 10 lemonades and 8 car washes. If they specialize, Billy spending all of his time doing the thing that he's least bad at, that is washing cars, he can do 6 car washes, which means Cindy's going to have to pick up the slack and wash 2 cars, right, so that we don't lose car washes. But that does free up enough of her time so that rather than producing just 7.5 lemonades, she can now produce 12. So even immediately, we get a gain of 2 lemonades, but no gain in car washes. But once we can move to the dynamic story, then we get to the case where Billy actually can produce all of the car washes. And he can do 10 of them in an hour, which is more than we started with. While Cindy now can actually focus all of her time on making lemonade, producing 20. So comparing the no specialization case with the specialization case after learning, we gain 10 lemonade and 2 car washes. So comparative advantage is a foundation for us to produce different things, for us to specialize, and then trade to get what we want. Even if it ends up that, as in this case, Cindy is actually better at everything to start with. But what about another case? Suppose that Billy and Cindy are actually perfectly identical. That is, they're, say, identical twins or clones of one another. In that case, once we do the math, we find out their opportunity costs are absolutely identical. So, that being the case, comparative advantage doesn't actually tell us anything, except after we account for learning. So let's suppose that Billy decides to go ahead and focus on car washes anyway. In that case, his time for car washes is going to decline, while the time for lemonade is going to increase. So while it may be there was no comparative advantage for either of them to start with before any learning happened, that comparative advantage does arise in the dynamic case, where now we do have a difference in opportunity cost, where Cindy should really focus on lemonade since she now has the lower opportunity cost. Billy should actually continue to focus on car washes. So this is a case where even though the two of us are identical to start with, we end up different over time because of the training we receive from the specialization that we just happen to choose for ourselves. We can also see this fact in the summary chart for production. If we look at lemonade and car washes, going from specialization to specialization in the static case, there absolutely is no gain. The two of us are identical. So any car washes that you give up making, I can pick up the slack exactly, and vice versa, which means that specializing doesn't provide any gain in the short run. In the long run, once we account for learning, then we do actually get gains. In this case, a gain of 2 car washes and 5 lemonades. So why then do we trade? What it really boils down to is that we trade because of our differences, not because of our similarities. Right? We have differences in preferences. That gives us a reason to trade with each other. We have differences in endowments. That gives us a reason to trade with each other. And we have differences in comparative advantage, either right now or in the future as we gain additional training. It is our differences that give us a material reason to bind together in an economic society, which I think is absolutely fundamental. Our differences, interestingly, are what draw us together economically.